part of the temporal bone. It is placed below and behind the squamous part of the temporal bone. So this is the mastoid part of the temporal bone. It has an external surface and internal surface. It has a superior border and a posterior border. External surface, internal surface, superior border and the inferior border. The external surface, it articulates with the squamous part by a squamomastoid suture. It may or may not be visualized. Near this squamomastoid fossa, there are two muscles. One is the occipital belly of the occipitofrontalis and other is the auricularis posterior. Occipital belly of the occipitofrontalis and the auricularis posterior. Behind and below we can see three muscles, one above the other. Here are the three muscles. From above downwards, they are sternocleidomastoid, next splenius capitis, and last of all is the longissimus capitis. This is about the external surface. Now about the internal surface. The internal surface, the most striking feature, there is a curved deep sulcus. This is the curved deep sulcus known as sigmoid sulcus, and this sigmoid sulcus lodges the sigmoid venous sinus. From the external surface, we may or may not see a foramen nearer to its junction with the occipital bone. Here is the mastoid foramen. Through this mastoid foramen, the emissary vein connecting the posterior auricular vein with the sigmoid venous sinus remains. From the external surface, a conical thick bone descends downwards, and this is known as mastoid process. At birth, the baby has no mastoid process, but while the baby starts to pull its head, there is a pulling effect of the sternocleidomastoid, which results in the formation of this mastoid process. In the mastoid process, at its inner surface, where I am placing my guide stick, this is known as the digastric fossa, and in here we can see the attachment of posterior belly of the digastric. Below that, there is another shallow groove for the lodgement of the occipital artery. So, posterior belly of the digastric and the occipital belly of the occipital artery. Now, in the mastoid bone, especially in the mastoid process, there are multiple small pockets of air cells. If the pockets of air cells are abundant, the bone is pneumatic. If there is less amount of air cells and more amount of sclerosed bone, it is sclerotic, and sometimes mixture of the air cells and the sclerosis, it is types mixed. So there are pneumatic type of mastoid and process, pneumatic type, the mixed type, and the sclerotic type. Now the two borders. This is the upper border. It articulates with the parietal bone, and this is the posterior border. This is the upper or the superior border, and this is the posterior border. This posterior border articulates with the occipital bone. Which part? The squamous part of the occipital bone. This is all about the mastoid part of the temporal bone.